Good afternoon and good morning, and welcome to the Office of Housing Counseling's webinar, Incentives and Resources to Make Energy Efficiency a Reality. Participants today are joined in listen-only mode. If you have any technical issues, please feel free to submit those via the chat box and send your message to the host. My colleague Kate from ICF will be there to help you sort out any issues. In addition, if you have any content-related questions, you can submit those in the Q&A box and send those to the host, presenter, and panelists. We will try to get written answers to your questions throughout the presentation, and then we will also answer some of them live at the end. So feel free to submit those as they come up. If you're looking for the materials today, they are posted on the HUD Exchange on the training page. And we will also have a recording of the session and a transcript posted 7 to 14 days after the live webinar. If you are looking for a certificate for today's webinar, that will be found on your learning transcript. After the webinar, we'll mark attendance and you can log in on the HUD Exchange. You just select the course name and click Print Certificate. We will be doing some Mentimeter today, and we're actually going to get started right now. So if you go to menti.com or use the link in the chat, we can start off our poll questions. And it looks like we are just logging in, so please bear with me. That does not usually happen. Soon you will see your Mentimeter pop up, and go ahead and hit the heart to let me know you're in there. I see there's a few people in. They're sort of stacking up, and I know folks are still joining us. We are quite early in the webinar, so I'll give folks a couple of minutes to get in there. Again, the code is in the chat. It's 5950. Oh, and that is not the correct code, so let me just drop that. For you, correct code is 27868620. So let's jump over here to the first question. First question is, which entities have you interacted with in the course of housing counseling? So you can select as many as apply. We have State Energy Office, local utility companies. We have home energy assessors and auditors. We also have here contractors making energy efficiency upgrades. And then that other option, if we've missed something, some sort of entity that you regularly interact with in the course of doing this type of energy efficiency work, then you can go ahead and select that option. So it looks like a lot of folks are already working with utility companies, which is great to see. And then a lot of others are in contact with the State Energy Office, home energy assessors, and contractors. So we are going to talk about working with all of these entities in the course of the presentation. And so it's really helpful for us to see what you all are already doing. I'm going to move us to our next question. And that is similar, but a different flavor. So what types of referrals do you offer to clients seeking energy cost savings? We have a whole plethora of options. You have Weatherization Assistance Program, LIHEAP, again, home energy audits, energy efficiency upgrade loans, utility billing programs. We have other, and then we have a spot for those of you who are new to this work, which you're in the right place, and maybe you're not making referrals yet. So this is great. So we're seeing a ton of folks who are working with Weatherization Assistance and LIHEAP, and then also those utility billing programs. That makes a lot of sense. And then I also see some folks who are connecting with home energy assessments, and then some folks who are also connecting homeowners with energy efficiency upgrade loans. So this is really useful information for us to have, so thank you for participating. I'm going to leave that open. You can continue to answer, and we'll just hop back over to our presentation. So our presenters today, I'm excited to welcome, we have some experts with us today who some of you may have heard from on the first webinar that we did in this series. We have Dana Bartlemay, Scott Ledford, and myself, Claire Weatherby. from ICF as technical assistance providers. And then we also have Maddie Salzman back from the US Department of Energy. She works on the Inflation Reduction Act Home Energy Rebates Implementation team and has a wealth of knowledge about DOE programs. So we're excited to have her today. As far as our agenda goes, just as sort of a setting the table comment, I know we have seen recently extreme weather in Texas, and more across the country, we've seen extreme heat, extreme cold, at times of year, even when you wouldn't expect it. So we're really excited to bring you this information today to help you help the renters, homeowners, and home buyers that you work with find and also make upgrades to their housing. So as a certified housing counselor and having worked with homeowners and renters in New York, I know this is a hot topic, but it's not one that maybe always seems easy to tackle. So today we're hoping to provide you lots of resources, ideas for how can folks actually fund some of this work. So we're going to start with a welcome from the Office of Housing Counseling, and then we'll jump into a survey of the landscape of energy efficiency resources. After that, we're going to go through some specific recommendations for renters, homeowners, and home buyers, and then we will sum up some of the tools and resources that we've talked about today, and we will have that Q&A that I mentioned at the top. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Gerald Mayer from the Office of Housing Counseling for our welcome.
Well, thank you, Claire, and welcome to all the HUD certified housing counselors and other folks joining us today to learn about incentives and resources to make energy efficiency a reality. I especially want to thank our friends from the Department of Energy for their help with today's training. Next slide, please. The Office of Housing Counseling is excited to partner with DOE to train housing counselors. Our goal is to expand your knowledge so you can help your clients learn about energy efficiency basics, incentives, and resources, and perhaps also see some savings in their household budgets and make housing greener and more affordable. Next slide, please. This is the second of the two webinar series. The first one is recorded so that you can access that material in our archive. This one will also be archived so that you could access both webinars on an ongoing basis. And the HUD remains committed to supporting our HUD certified housing counselors through this kind of training and also through technical assistance. And we also look forward to providing more training on energy efficiency and other topics that counselors can use to help clients realize their housing goals. So now, without further ado, I'd like to hand the mic over to Maddie from DOE, who will take us through today's presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Claire and Jerry. Lovely to be here again. As I mentioned, my name is Maddie Salzman, and I'm a management and programs analyst at the US Department of Energy, where I've been working on access to efficiency in housing for the last 7 years. I spent some time managing programs like Home Energy Score and workforce initiatives, and recently changed jobs to be focused on the home energy rebates authorized under the Inflation Reduction Act, which will be one of the forthcoming resources that we'll mention in today's presentation. So first off, thank you so much for attending. It's lovely to see so many people on the line. And thank you for all that you already do to help homeowners, buyers, and renters make informed decisions. Our goal is to help housing counselors be armed with information to help residents have better comfort, better quality of life, and lower energy costs. And as Jerry mentioned, if you were not on the first webinar presentation, I do recommend watching that one as well, as it will kind of set the foundation of how homes use energy and why energy efficiency matters in the first place, whereas this one will go over more of the resources to help folks do things about that. So with that, we can go to the next slide. So there are a lot of different resources. If there's one thing you take away, there is no shortage of resources in these spaces. So I want to start off by describing some of the resources that are available at a federal level that many homeowners, renters, and buyers can tap into around the country. So at the U.S. Department of Energy, or I'll say DOE for short, we have many online resources that can provide information about do-it-yourself upgrades and information just to learn more about technology options. So I recommend checking out DOE's Energy Saver Guide, as well as other online tools. DOE has also developed the Home Energy Score program, which we talked about a bit more in the previous webinar, but it's a tool that's like a miles per gallon rating to help homeowners understand how a home uses energy in a way that's comparable to other homes as well. And that was, if you're interested for more information specifically on that, that's more on the previous webinar. And then there are also benefits programs that are specifically designed to alleviate energy burdens for lower income households. So two examples it looks like folks are already familiar with. One is the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP. The other one is the Weatherization Assistance Program, or WAP. LIHEAP is managed out of the Department of Health and Human Services, whereas DOE manages the Weatherization Assistance Program. But often they're managed by state or local agencies that are helping folks access housing improvements. I'll note that both of those programs are only available to lower income households, and the specific income qualification standard will vary by state. So you'll want to look into what the qualification standards are in your area. And to give you a sense of scope, LIHEAP reaches millions of households every year with energy bill assistance and home repair, so basic home repair. And the Weatherization Assistance Program reaches tens of thousands of households every year with cost-effective energy efficiency improvements. The last one on this federal list is the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy tax credits, which have existed already for some time, but due to the Inflation Reduction Act, were actually increased. So folks in many cases can get reimbursed on up to 30% of project costs for certain upgrades. DOE and the IRS have information about those energy efficiency tax credits and renewable energy tax credits. And these are accessible to any household that has tax liability. So in some cases, the lower income households might be better fit to be served through LIHEAP or WAP, but then any household with tax liability is able to potentially take advantage of these tax credits. The Inflation Reduction Act also added the number of technologies that are covered here. So that includes battery storage, electrical panel upgrades, and home energy assessments are all can be partially reimbursed through these tax credits. And finally, there's more. Coming soon, there will be more resources because of programs launched by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act. So as I mentioned at the top, I'm working on trying to deploy the home energy rebate programs, which will be $8.8 billion in upfront cost reduction of home efficiency and electrification. But there are also newly launching state energy efficiency revolving loan funds, which might be accessible to households, as well as EPA is going to be setting up a $27 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund. So in case you weren't sure, there's a lot on a national level. On the next slide, I will mention even more resources. So I know this is going to be a lot of information, but the hope is that if I'll say in general, if you're curious what's available in your area, talking to somebody at your state energy office is going to be a really great way to start. Because they're going to know about the nationally available resources as well as state and local resources that might be available. So that's the top of this slide. Really recommend focusing on getting in touch with folks in your area that are aware of all these different programs. So sometimes various states and local governments have passed ordinances or laws that include even more energy resources. And that can be accessible through your state energy office, or they'll at least know who next to talk to. Sometimes there's also resources available through state housing finance agencies, or HFAs. So that's a good resource or group of folks to get in touch with as well. And finally, as many of you acknowledged in the Mentimeter, local utility providers often offer rebates or other financial incentives for energy improvements. Many utilities are regulated entities that are either required or incentivized to offer these types of programs, which is why it's a fairly safe bet as an effort to help households reduce energy burdens. So I know I just threw a lot of information about various resources, but one useful way to think about some of these resources are by thinking about who is your client and what are their needs. And so that's really how we've divided up the rest of the presentation today. So you can think of two high-level buckets, either between financial assistance, so actually getting money to either get a home assessed or make improvements. And then there's information resources. So maybe somebody who has their own funding resources or is not ready to go all in on buying something. Information resources can be a good place to start. For financial assistance, there's some resources that are just for low and moderate income households and income qualified. And then there's another bucket of resources that are often not restricted based on income. They could be restricted based on other factors, but generally more broadly available regardless of income. So I already mentioned LIHEAP and WAP, which are listed on that low and moderate income resource pool. And I also wanted to mention that there's home rehab assistance that's funded through HUD as well. So some of you guys might already be familiar with the community development block grant programs that exist, but that would be something else to look into. For non-income restricted, utility programs can be either way, but oftentimes there are ones that are not income restricted, and also incentives or financing options that either exist through mortgage companies or property tax incentives. And we'll talk a little bit more later about some of the information resources that exist to help folks navigate all of these financial resources. So with that, I think I've hopefully thrown enough resources at people's faces for now, and I will pass it off to Dana to talk about some of the options that are available for renters.
Great, thank you, Maddie. Hi, everybody. I'm Dana Bartlome with ICF, and I am happy to be back with you guys for this second webinar in the series. I'm newer to ICF, but I have spent most of my career working at the intersection of energy efficiency and affordable housing, including past work with utility companies to design energy efficiency programs that work for multifamily property owners and renters. So I'm happy to be here today with some recommendations about how to talk to clients who are looking to rent an apartment or a home, or who are currently renting, about energy efficiency. So when you're working with a renter who is looking for an apartment, there are a few things that you can recommend your clients ask the leasing agent or the property manager. They can ask what utilities they'll be responsible for paying, whether that's gas, electricity, or water, and which are included in the rent. They can also ask whether the landlord or property manager can provide that average bill amount so that they can factor this information into the budget for that home or that apartment. So another question might be, what type of heating and cooling system does the unit have? You can encourage clients to research rates in the area. Electric heat may be cheaper in some regions of the country, but that's not always the case. But understanding kind of how rates operate and how they affect bills will really, again, help you kind of budget for that unit. Prospective renters can also ask whether the building has a certification like LEED or Energy Star. Often if a building has this type of certification, there's going to be a plaque just right on the front window or in the leasing office, but that's not always the case. And not all buildings do certification. So renters can also ask whether the apartment has had a home energy assessment recently or has undergone a rehabilitation. And this is just a way that renters can understand the efficiency of the building or the home before they move in and understand how it fits into their monthly budget. So once a client has moved in, or when you're working with a client who's already renting a home or an apartment, remember that checklist of easy actions and adjustments that Scott walked us through on the previous webinar. So we have that handout that we can provide again. And behaviors like unplugging electronics when you're not using them, or making sure air vents are unblocked, or, some of those low-cost solutions that we discussed, like buying door sweeps or smart power strips. These are things that anyone can do, including renters, that will help them save money and lower energy use. And I was also really happy to see that most of you are already working with your utility companies. So there are those programs that you can refer renters to for energy efficiency upgrades and way to save money on bills. So utilities spend billions of dollars on energy efficiency programs each year, providing customers free or discounted in-unit upgrades. And these program offerings do vary by utility. So that's why it's important that you keep that connection to your local utility providers. So for example, some utilities offer energy efficiency kits that include LED bulbs, power strips, faucet aerators, and weather stripping that customers can install themselves. And other programs include the utility coming in to assess and install measures. So billing rates and plans are something that you can look into and encourage your customers to talk to utilities about which rate plan might be the best for them. So many utilities offer discounted rates for income eligible households or senior citizens. And budget billing may also be a way that customers can, who want to pay a set amount each month, can look into.
I can hop on. So I think where Dana left off was on demand response program. So the way this basically works is that if you opt into a program like this, the utility company will send out notifications every so often when use is really high on the grid, asking folks if it's reasonable to turn down their power at that time. So it's a way for consumers to save and also for the grid as a whole to manage the energy use in a more efficient way. We also wanted to mention information about renewable energy. So this for renters is maybe not something that would immediately come to mind, but there are ways that renters can also take advantage. So in some cases, the property itself might have solar where the property is generating solar power that may help reduce overall bills for the building. And then there's also power owned by third parties. So in your area, and you might have to do some digging because some of these are pilot programs and they're kind of just starting up, but renters can sometimes buy into a subscription for solar power. So there will be a solar panel offsite somewhere and you pay in and then you receive a bill credit for the amount of power that solar generates. So there's some interesting, exciting options out there, and we really encourage you to take a look in your area. And now we're just going to jump into Mentimeter for a second and do a little knowledge check, get you back involved and see where we're at. So you can use that same link and code, and I'm just going to drop it in the chat right now so that you all have it. And then as always, you can also go to menti.com and use the code 2786-8620. So this is an open-ended question. Your client, Sam, is looking for a new apartment. What questions can they ask potential landlords to assess energy costs? So we kind of just went over this, but wanted to get the juices flowing and see what suggestions you have. Maybe you have some suggestions that we didn't mention yet. So I'm seeing a lot of folks writing about average costs, utility bills. That's so key. Let's let it scroll a little bit. What kind of heating and cooling? Which utilities am I responsible for? Is the building LEED certified? Yeah, so these are all great questions, and I'm sure many of you work with your clients on a day-to-day about these types of questions. So helping them assess what is the true cost of the housing that they're entering into, and how might that vary based on the actual energy profile. Great, thanks for participating. I think we'll just pop back to the slides. And I would like to hand it over to my colleague, Scott Ledford, to talk to you about recommendations for homeowners. Scott, what do you have to say?
Just a few things, Claire. Thanks very much. Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Ledford. Also, I'm glad to see so many folks. Hopefully you're back for the second round here. I know a lot of you were asking a lot of questions in the first webinar about, this is great information. So how do we get this paid for? How do our clients get access to funding to help make these things happen? So hopefully that's what you're going to get from this webinar. I've been with ICF a long time, over 25 years, and I have done a lot of work in the affordable housing space, especially, and that's kind of was my entree into energy efficiency and obviously recognizing the benefits of energy efficiency for lower income folks and really helping to build their budgets through energy efficiency. So that's enough about me. Why don't we jump to the slides? So I wanted to start this part of the conversation. As you can imagine, a lot of resources that are available for energy efficiency are geared toward homeowners. So this is going to be a long section with a lot of information. Not that you haven't already received a lot of information, but what I wanted to highlight for you was we created this template for you to use that is available on the HUD Exchange. And it's really creating a reference sheet for yourself so that as you do the research and you follow up on some of these links that we're talking about, you're able to keep a track at your desk or for your organization of who are these local utility providers, what do they provide, who's the contact person there that I can provide to my client that I'm sitting across the desk from. So again, this is kind of a template for you to use. Depending upon how much information you find, you might want to build yourself a spreadsheet. I think you're going to have so many resources to work from here that you're going to really be able to build something useful that you can speak to your clients from. So go ahead to the next slide. As Dana mentioned, the checklist of easy actions and modest adjustments is also applicable to homeowners, right? So again, unplug electronics, make sure the air vents are not blocked. We keep repeating these, but that whole checklist is also very much useful for homeowners as well as for renters. In the first presentation, you see the link there. The slide deck isn't quite up. I'm sorry, the slide deck is up there, but the recording isn't quite up yet. So it'll be up hopefully very soon. And you'll be able to go back and look at some of the conversation that we had about what is a home energy assessment. Claire, if I could get you to click on that Home Energy Score Certified Assessor link, I just want to show folks kind of, we'll walk through some of these links that are in this section in particular. But this is what you'll see. If you go to that link, you're going to see a map of the US. And I don't know, Claire, pick Wisconsin. It's in my eyeballs right now. And so in Wisconsin, we see that there are 6 partners who provide home energy score assessments. And some of them are going to be very local to the Wisconsin market. You can see Focus on Energy serves the Wisconsin market, where you can see that several of the others serve the entire nation. So let's just pick another one, Ohio, staying in our Great Lakes region. So we have similar partners, but we end up having a slightly different list because some of these are very localized. So again, you obviously know where you're providing your services, and you can go in and you can use this tool and you can get this information, contact those folks, and understand what you might be able to talk with your clients about. We can go back to the slides. So on this side, what I want to point out is in the last presentation, we already looked at this link to the high efficiency all electric appliances. There's that little snip on the left-hand side where you can see this was about a link that you can use with your clients or you can provide to your clients. And you can really get a good understanding of what are the most efficient appliances and also hot water heaters, things like that. You can go to this Energy Star page and get a good sense of the products that are available to help with energy efficiency. Also, as has already been mentioned, the utility providers often do rebates for more efficient upgrades. They run home performance programs. And then if we jump down to the home improvement expert link, Claire. The other thing you can share with your clients is how to hire the right people to do these energy efficiency upgrades on what is their home. In this case, we're talking about homeowners, right? So on the right-hand side, if you scroll down just a little bit more, Claire, you'll see there's a find a partner near you. So you can type in a location. You might just click on browse map. Claire's been Googling New York already, or searching New York. So again, here's a map of the US. You can click on a state. Let's go to Nevada this time. And what it'll do is it'll provide you that list. And so if we reference back to that sheet that I mentioned at the beginning, you can start to insert these contacts into that sheet and start to build your reference list. Back to the slides, please. Maddie covered really well the Weatherization Assistance Program as well as the LIHEAP program. So if we just click on the Weatherization Assistance Program link, this similarly will take you to a map of the United States. If you scroll down a little bit, take you to a map there. You're able to click in there, find your state energy office, your state weatherization administrator. And in some cases, you might be able to get information about, or from this, you might be able to get information about the local providers. So for example, if you click on Colorado, this one I did in advance. So if you click on Colorado, you can scroll down and there's a map of the state. And this just happens to be how Colorado provides this information. So every state may be a little bit different. But here you can see on the right-hand side, there's phone numbers to get in touch with. You can find, if you're serving Colorado, you can know, where your client is and identify who can be contacted. All right, if we could jump back to the slides. So LIHEAP, again, you can see on the left-hand side, there'll be a map. I think the important distinction between Weatherization Assistance Program and LIHEAP is LIHEAP's primary purpose is around that bill assistance, whereas Weatherization Assistance is primarily on the upgrades and the energy efficiency improvements. So LIHEAP can be used in that way, and it is often used in that way in the last couple of bullets: emergency heating equipment, energy efficiency upgrades. So that's just the way I think about those two programs. The great thing is they both can help our lower income households. Go ahead to the next slide. HUD also has a, HUD in the FHA, Federal Housing Administration, has its own program called the 203K Single Family Rehab Loan Program. Now, this isn't specifically about energy efficiency upgrades, but it is a way that you can fund energy efficiency upgrades. So if we go to the first link there, FHA 203K, this will give you some information about it. You'll see there's two flavors of it. One is the limited 203K up to $35,000, and then the full-on 203K. And then Claire, I think you have it open already. The next one is a place that you can search for lenders who do 203K lending. So what you need to do is go down to the bottom, exactly where Claire is highlighting already. You need to click on that box. You can see that there's search features for you there. And so again, when you're filling out the reference sheet that you can use with clients, you're able to use this tool to identify what lenders might be able to provide 203K financing to your client. We can go back to the slides. I do want to spend a moment talking about the CDBG program and the home program. This is kind of where I come from in all of this. These are programs I've worked with extensively over time. These are resources that are available to all states and to many, 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 many local jurisdictions around the country. The question will be whether your local jurisdiction has decided through their public input process whether they have set up a home rehabilitation program. And if they have, that program is there to support lower income homeowners in rehabbing their homes. One of the important connections that I find in this space is that these programs, Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnerships programs, so these funds come from HUD to the local governments who make the decisions about how they're going to use the money. But what it can really do, for example, in the Weatherization Assistance Program, sometimes there are issues in a home that the weatherization program can't address. And in order to get the energy efficiency upgrades, we have to address some more basic things about the home. And these are two great funding resources that are available in communities across the country. So I really encourage you to look for your local agencies who are running these programs, understand how these programs are operating locally, and use that as a means to connect lower income clients who need to take care of some basic things that they just may not be able to cover otherwise in order to get access to some more energy efficiency upgrades. All right, let's go to the next slide. We also have Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I'm sure this audience is probably familiar with those two entities. But so Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac have their own types of financing available. And in this case, we're talking about it from a refinancing context. So if you could click on the Homestyle Energy link, Claire, then we'll end up on a page where you can dive in and, you all as housing counselors have a good understanding of how all of this works. So I'm not going to try and cover it all, but the important thing is you can go in here and you can read about the flexibilities that these types of products offer that are different than maybe your standard refinancing package that might be available from Fannie Mae. So if you scroll down for me, Claire, keep going a bit, there's a few boxes, there we go. So you can start to see what's the maximum loan to value ratio here, and you can see the types of improvements that are allowable, and you can go up to 15% of the as completed value for specifically financing energy related improvements. The Fannie Mae one also includes resiliency improvements as well. And if we scroll down, we'll see that there's some debt to income ratio flexibility that's provided by both of these programs, Fannie Mae's as well as Freddie Mac's. So you can follow both of those links. You can understand a little bit more about what those options might be and how they might serve a particular client. Let's go back to the slides. There's also these things called green banks. And go ahead and click on that green banks link, Claire. So green banks are set up by some entities, sometimes capital providers, sometimes by states, and they are designed to make the financing of energy efficiency more affordable and better. So this link allows you to scroll down and you can find what green banks are available. And again, you can add them to that reference sheet if they are available in the area that you are serving clients. So you can see there's a breadth across the country. The difference is these are not everywhere. These have to be set up. And so you're not going to see a map of the US and every single state has one of these in it, but you can see there's plenty of them. And now you know exactly where to go to research and find out where they are. We'll go back to the slides, Claire. So there's two other things, and I'm not going to have Claire jump back to the slides again on either one of these. So we have the state energy financing resources. So this will cover green banks, but also other types of financing resources that might be available in a state. So you can see on the left-hand side, there's a snip of the map. Again, you can click through and you can find that. And then there's also one for utility on-bill financing programs. So Claire, if you could just jump back to the web browsers and show both of those. So this is the one for on-bill financing. It's giving you the map. You can click through, you can find out which utility is serving the area that you're interested in, and then also hopefully connect a client to that type of program. Go ahead back to the slides, Claire. Maddie mentioned a little while ago that there are some federal tax credits for energy efficiency improvements that have been in place for some time. And then there's some new ones coming along. So if we could just go to that credits link. Well, you'll see here, and it plays out exactly as Maddie described it. For example, if you pick the line for battery storage, if just a few rows down, you can see that under the current tax credits that are available in the 2022 tax year, it's not quite there, right? However, with the new Inflation Reduction Act programs, it's becoming available. So this chart can help you to work with clients to understand what is currently available. And we're talking about the 2022 tax year, right? So, whoa, that's moving out, isn't it? But coming up, you can see all of the types of tax credits that will be available for the various types of equipment. And you can see also added in there, as Maddie mentioned, home energy audits are becoming tax credit as well. Thanks, Claire. Great driving here, great driving. I also want to point out, I really love this acronym. Whoever came up with it did a very great job, but there's a database of state incentives for renewables and energy, affectionately known as DESIRE. So again, just a great acronym. But here you can see on the SNP that there's a map of the US. You can click in and drill down into your area and understand what types of incentives are available for renewable energy as well as energy efficiency. So once again, drill down, find those contacts, get them into your reference sheet. And as you can tell by now, you probably want to have an Excel sheet, but you can still use the Word document that we created as a basis for building that out. If we could click on that last link, Claire, for home energy rebate programs, this will actually be a great handoff back to Maddie here in a moment. But so this is a website that's been set up by the DOE as a one-stop shop for you to come and keep up with what's happening on these new energy rebate programs. So if you scroll down just a little bit, Claire, there's a section right now about responding to a DOE request for information, or RFI. You can see in here, there's a deadline of March 3rd. So you might want to go ahead and take a look at what that RFI is asking for. Is there anything that you want to contribute to that? And I'm sure Maddie would be thrilled in the end to have some good feedback to work from. But come back to this. We provided this link. We encourage you to come back to it so you can stay abreast of what's going on as all of this continues to move forward. And as Claire's pointing out, you can also provide your email address in there. Back to the slides. And as I mentioned, I'm going to hand it back over to Maddie, who's going to talk about recommendations for home buyers. Thanks for all the driving, Claire.
Wow, yeah, very impressed with the driving. And Scott, that couldn't have been a more perfect segue. Totally agree. Please let us know what you'd love to see with the rebates. We, as Scott mentioned, the RFI is open, and we really just want to hear from folks on what would be useful for you to have. There are 60 questions in that RFI, but you don't need to answer all of them. You can just answer one if you'd like. So don't be intimidated by how many questions there are. Okay, now that we've gone over the resource options specific to both renters and homeowners, in a similar way, I'm going to discuss some of the options that are available specifically for home buyers, and maybe some of the ways that home buyers are thinking about these issues. So before beginning the search, or you can think of this at an early stage when somebody's coming and talking to you, wanting to say, hey, I'd like to buy a home soon. What do I need to be thinking about? So the big thing is we want to make sure that folks are considering energy costs as an element of their total cost of home ownership, and that they are being realistic about what those costs are likely to be, and also understanding how they can help reduce those costs either in the short term or the long term. So, early on, talking to a client about what type of housing they're considering, if they're interested in a few different types of housing, weighing the pros and cons of different costs and energy features of those different types of housing. As we discussed on the previous webinar, there are general trends that if you're in a single weather region, if you're, just looking within a state or a city, in general, multifamily units tend to run the cheapest in terms of energy costs per month, up to single family detached homes that tend to run the most expensive in terms of energy costs. Of course, there can be variation. There is a lot of variation. Another important thing to mention is, on average, throughout the entire United States. You see on the lower end about $1,000 a year, but on the higher end, which is $2,200. Of course, if you live in a very hot or a very cold climate, those numbers are going to be higher because there's more work that the energy has to do in those homes. If you live in a very temperate climate or a place with low energy costs, you maybe will see lower costs there as well. So really at the beginning of the search, you want to be helping your clients assure that they've thoughtfully considered the full cost of home ownership given their local region, housing type, and housing size that they're looking at. So once your client has maybe honed in on a housing size, part of the country, type of home that they're looking for, you can then help them better assess the listing. So some of this is very similar to actually what we discussed could be useful for renters. But often there's access to more information on home listing websites for buyers. So oftentimes there's a lot of information hiding in the home facts section of a listing. So things like the home's age, fuel type that is being used for heating, whether or not there's air conditioning, those can all give you some indicators as to what energy bills might be. Of course, we always recommend asking the seller or the listing agent, can you share with us what are typical energy bills? Can you, does the home have an energy assessment report we can look at? Has the home had a home energy score? These are all things that can be useful, and particularly depending on how hot the market is. Somebody who's really interested to sell their home might be very well interested to share this information with you. It's important to also ask if homes might have something like green certifications. I'll be honest that most homes do not, but you certainly wouldn't want to miss a home that does. So on the next slide, we'll talk about your client has chosen a house, right? And you can imagine that goes one of two ways. Either they have chosen a house that's already really high energy performing. It has low energy bills. It's going to be really comfortable. It was built really nicely in terms of energy features. Or a house maybe that doesn't have some of those things yet, but could, and maybe they're interested in making installations. So, I'll mention, we're not expecting anybody to fundamentally make a home buying decision based on its energy use. That a lot of things matter to people in terms of location, style, the lot, etc. But we want to bring to your attention some of the financing products that also Scott mentioned that can help people either better afford a home that they're interested in that is higher energy performing, or better afford upgrades to eventually have a home that's higher energy performing. So some of the mortgage products that we've discussed from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA insured mortgages is allowing homes that do not yet have energy features to finance up to 15% of the home's as completed value for energy improvements. And in both cases, whether the home is already energy efficient or not, they can get a stretch on their debt to income ratio based on the theory that a home that's more energy efficient is going to have typically lower energy bills, and therefore you can trust that the person is more likely to be able to afford the home. So this can be a really useful tool for a whole bunch of cases and worth talking to the client about, and also knowing what lenders in your area are offering these types of mortgage products. Beyond getting a mortgage product with green designations associated with the mortgage itself, there's also other financing solutions. There's some utilities that run either financing programs or programs that behave very similarly to financing programs, even if they're not financing. So for instance, there's one program called Pay As You Save, where somebody can get the cost of their energy upgrade paid back as a tariff on their energy bill. Usually it's a pretty low interest rate associated with this. And that could be a good option if your borrower or your client is not interested in taking on debt associated with the work. And as we've already mentioned, things like revolving loan funds and green banks can also be helpful financing resources that can help stack together the house itself would be energy improvements. And of course, the rebates and tax incentives that are forthcoming. So with that, I will pass it off to Claire to present on some summary resources of these tools.
Thanks, Maddie. Before we jump into the tools and resources, we have a couple of Mentimeter questions, and so I'm hoping that it will cooperate with us this time. Let's see. So I'm going to drop that link in the chat, and we're going to hope that this system will cooperate. Great. So I see folks are in there. Jump back in. You have the link in the chat, and you have this code as well. So if you decide to access by going to menti.com, you can enter that code in to get in there. There are a bunch of you, so we can get started. I think we have maybe 3 questions for you. So the first is, utility companies often do all of the following except. So you're choosing here the one wrong answer. Is it energy audits, billing plans, rebates, or refinancing for energy improvements? You have about 10 seconds left. Okay, so get those answers in. So we're looking for, what do utility companies not do very often? And yes, most of you got that. So utility companies are not going to be refinancing for energy improvements. Although, as Maddie just mentioned, some utilities do have ways to help fund energy improvements through mechanisms that add payments onto your bill, on-bill tariffs, things like that. And then, as you mentioned, of course, utility companies will sometimes do rebates for new equipment, do those budget billing plans, and provide energy audits. So great job. All right, and our next question is, which of these is not an indicator that a home might have lower home energy costs when conducting a housing search? So we talked about this with rental. We also talked about this with home buying. Your options are high home energy score, which would be a positive home energy score. Something like being a unit in the middle of the building as opposed to on the corner. We have newer home, and then we have multifamily building. So we're asking you to choose which of these is least likely to be an indicator that a home will have low energy costs. Great, so you have a mix of answers here, and this was kind of a tricky one, and there's some amount of judgment that goes into it. So newer home was the correct answer in this case, and the reason why is that although it may be the case that newer homes can have lower home energy costs, that's not always going to be the case. So it really depends on the quality of the construction, and in some areas, older homes, maybe brick homes, are built in a way that actually is conducive to saving energy. So that was the red herring. As far as the other answers go, multifamily building, as Maddie mentioned, those are generally going to have lower energy costs per household than, for example, detached home. And then units in the middle might be less drafty than those that are on the corner with more outside walls. And then, of course, you have high home energy score. That's going to always be an indicator that the home is more efficient. So let's do one more question. If we can, if it will let us. I think we're going to jump back to the slides. So just to sum up, none of these resources are new. They've all been discussed throughout the presentation, but I've just divided them in hopes that it's a bit easier for folks to access. So on this slide, you have your state and federal resources, including energy offices, this Desire database that Scott mentioned, and a bunch of other ways to look up tax credits, weatherization, LIHEAP, and sort of an explainer on utility rate options from DOE. We also have our resources for energy upgrades. So we've got that sample reference sheet, which is on the registration page. And then we also have manufactured housing, home improvement advice, Energy Star information, and this past webinar on energy scores. And then we have our financing resources. So you have the links to the 203K, the Fannie and the Freddie products, our on-bill financing link, and then this lookup for state energy financing programs. So check those out. They're throughout the slides and they're also listed right here. And you'll also find them listed on that worksheet that Scott referenced, which is again linked on the training registration page. So we have only a couple minutes, but I want to invite Scott back and our speakers back in case there are any questions. Maybe we can fit one in for the audience today. I will hand it to you.
Thank you. And I'm going to hand it to the audience. There are literally no questions right now. So if you have any questions that we can answer in a short time, feel free to drop them in the Q&A.
I guess I will mention right now, so for folks who are looking for the slides and the handouts, those are on the training registration page. I think the link that I dropped, perhaps you may need to click that register link in order to get to that page. So my apologies for that, but those should be there for you. And I know we've covered a lot of resources today. I don't know if maybe Scott or Maddie, you want to highlight maybe the couple that you were most excited about, or you think folks should maybe check out, maybe lesser known?
Yeah, no, I know we gave folks a ton of information, so I'm sure there's some absorbing going on. But I'll just say, you know, one thing we do understand at DOE is, you know, the process of changing one's home is a journey. It's not, you know, just one thing that people are willing to take on always at once. And so what we're really interested in is to help clients make sure they understand what their options are and to be prepared. So there's a lot of moments like where somebody might buy a home because that's exactly the home they want, which is great. But the equipment's a little old. So to just be prepared, maybe be saving away for a new or efficient piece of equipment when they're ready to do that. And to be aware of the resources that are available. So I think the number one I'll say is reaching out to the state energy office, I think is always a great idea. They can be a really useful resource to what programs they most recommend in your area. So yeah, I would start there if you're looking at all the links, not knowing where to start. But Scott, curious for you to chime in.
Well, actually a couple questions have come in. So
there we go.
Claire, I'm going to defer to you about how much time we have to do questions now, but I want to highlight one of them, which I think is quite interesting and raises, what do you think are the best resources for renters looking to reduce their energy burden in extreme heat days? Lots of LIHEAP case studies I see are about warming homes, not cooling.
Yeah, it's a really important question. LIHEAP can still be a very useful resource there. I don't believe there's any sort of restriction or set aside strictly for spending the funds on heating costs versus cooling costs. So making sure that clients know it's an option for both. I'm running in a few different directions because I think having conversations with renters and landlords ahead of time about, you know, how to ensure the home is as efficient as possible is important. I know when we're having an extreme heat day in DC, I get a message from my landlord giving me ideas of things to do to stay cooler at home. But a lot of times those can kind of come by surprise and be hard to prepare for. So, you know, even just simple things like on a really hot day, keeping the blinds closed so that heat isn't coming in through the windows. Just little things like that can end up making a really big difference.
Yeah, agreed.
Scott, if you have other ones.
Well, I'd say I live in an area that does get some of the extreme heat. And for those who don't live in those types of areas, I'd suggest actually going to the websites of energy folks in those states. So for example, Arizona, they probably have a lot of information about what to do on extreme heat days. So if you're in Michigan and you haven't dealt with extreme heat days a lot, but you're starting to, you might just go and check out these areas that have been dealing with it for a while, and see what kinds of recommendations they're putting out there. So exactly what Maddie said, and what I do in my own home is I close all my blinds, I get every awning out as far as I possibly can, and just, try to keep the home closed so that the hot air doesn't have an opportunity to come in through windows. A lot of times we think about, oh, I'll open my windows, I'll get a little bit of a breeze, but that is really not that helpful. Speaking from experience.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott and Maddie. Hopefully that was helpful. And sorry we didn't have more time to get to more of these questions that just popped in. But hopefully we have at least provided you some places to start to find answers to some of these questions and gather those resources for your clients. So thank you so much again to both of you for sharing your expertise today.
Happy
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate
Thanks,
your time.
everybody.
If you are looking for further training on other topics, you can always go to the training digest on the HUD Exchange. We have our final OHC Basics series webinar next week. And then we have some exciting content with respect to combating appraisal bias, and housing services for persons impacted by domestic violence and sexual assault. So those are linked here. And if you do have further questions, you can always find us on the HUD Exchange Housing Counseling page. You can email housing.counseling@hud.gov, and then you'll have the lookup tool there. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We are really excited to share this information with you and hope that it is helpful to you in helping your clients achieve energy savings. Have a great day.